Welcome to the third part of our video lecture for Module 3-B. In this video, we are going to start our discussion with the mechanism of cleanup operations. Because while we have already discussed the regulations provided for under the Clean Water Act are present, it's still possible that there may be actual pollutions. No, notwithstanding these regulations, notwithstanding the standards, it's still possible that a certain source, a certain person, will cause pollution to one or more water bodies. All right, in the Philippines, and so um, the cleanup operations framework or mechanism uh, is incorporated in the law in order to address the possibility and the actual uh, water pollution in certain water bodies. Under the law, cleanup operations, it's a responsibility, and it's a responsibility that arises on the part of someone who causes pollution in excess of the applicable and prevailing standards. All right. Note that um, cleanup operations include three main actions or main responsibilities. No, the responsibility to contain, the responsibility to remove, and the responsibility to clean up any pollution incident at his or her own expense. All right, to the extent that the same water bodies have been rendered unfit for utilization and beneficial use. This means that within the framework of the cleanup operations, this is a responsibility that arises when there is a pollution in excess of the applicable and prevailing standards. All right, uh, and therefore it's something that must be done by the person liable thereto. But of course, there's also a possibility that the person uh, uh, refuses to do the cleanup operations, notwithstanding that that person is liable for cleanup operations. Now, the next question then is, what is the effect of the failure or refusal to do cleanup operations? All right. Now, when a person is liable for cleanup operations and he or she refuses, okay, this amounts to a criminal act. All right? Note, no, failure or refusal to conduct cleanup operations, but you're not liable, it does not amount to criminal act. All right? You have to be liable under the law to be for cleanup operations, and then you refuse or you fail to do cleanup operations in order for a criminal act to arise. Now, what is our basis in stating that it's a criminal act? All right, it's a criminal act because under the law, failure to undertake, all right, cleanup operations either willfully or through gross negligence, when you are liable, all right, shall be punished by imprisonment. Of course, no, imprisonment would show that because this act is punishable by imprisonment, the act is criminal in nature. Of course, and a fine per day, per each day of violation. Okay, the imprisonment would be a deterrent to the persons involved, while the fines would be a deterrent not just to the persons involved but also to the business interest of the source. All right, because this is a monetary and per day of violation, right? It will accrue for every day of violation. It can amount to millions and millions if not addressed immediately. All right, but this is under normal circumstances, and because this is a criminal act, it can have an aggravated circumstance. It can be aggravated by circumstances according to the law here. When there's a refusal or failure to do so, and it results into serious injury or loss of life and or irreversible water contamination of surface, ground, coastal, and marine water. All right. the imprisonment shall be aggravated to not less than 6 years and 1 day, and not more than 12 years, and a fine of 500,000 per day for each day of violation, no? During which the omission or contamination continues. Okay, it's now aggravated. All right. Note, again, I repeat that cleanup operations, it's a responsibility or liability that arises when a person who pollutes, all right, the water body in excess of what is allowable. Note that this contemplates that there's already a permission to do so. There's already a permit to discharge to do so, because once there's because if there's no permit to discharge and then you are required to procure a permit to discharge, and that's applicable, or that's subject of another provision under the Philippine Clean Water Act. All right. Now, what if, for example, no, there's failure to do so, or there's refusal to do so, but then uh, the the pollution is so severe, all right, or so grave that the pollution requires emergency action, or that it requires emergency cleanup. Will the DNR just stand idle while the water body suffers, while the environment suffers from that act? Anyway, there's criminal action, right? No, because when the situation requires emergency cleanup operations under the law, all right, in the event in the event that emergency cleanup operations are necessary, and the polluter fails to immediately undertake the same, the department will not sit idle, of course. The department, in coordination with other government agencies, shall conduct the cleanup operations by itself. However, the expenses incurred in the said operations shall be reimbursed by the persons who caused the pollution, of course, upon proper administrative determination in accordance with the law. All right. The administrative determination of the cause of pollution shall be incorporated in the proceedings of the Pollution Adjudication Board. All right. And of course, in the absence of a complainant and a PAB proceeding, the secretary may authorize the Environmental Management Bureau director to make the determination, of course, upon observance of due process, by affording due notice, hearing, and of course providing them opportunity to be heard and to adduce evidence. All right, under the rules of the implementing rules of the Clean Water Act. All right, now let's go to prohibited acts. Okay, now prohibited acts are those acts enumerated under the law, under the Philippine Clean Water Act. All right, and these are violations which lead to civil and administrative penalties under Section 28. Note that we, there's no requirement that we memorize these prohibited acts. In fact, just familiarize. In fact, if ever this will be asked in the examinations, I will just indicate there that the acts are considered as prohibited acts under Section 27. Okay, but what I want you to highlight, all right, and learn from here is that prohibited acts, these are acts or violations that lead only to civil and administrative penalties, no, under Section 28. Now, civil penalties being fine, all right, by the Pollution Adjudication Board, an administrative body. All right, the fine would vary depending on the gravity of the offense, so long as it does not amount to a gross violation, of course. Okay, and administrative penalty, of course, when the violator is a person or a point source which is required to get permits, which is required to get a discharge permit. All right. Then the secretary, upon the recommendation of the Pollution Adjudication Board, may order the closure, the suspension of development or construction, or even cessation of operations. All right, of that point source, or even the disconnection of water supply where it is appropriate. All right. It's as if saying that one who pollutes water does not deserve to use clean water. All right. And so where it is appropriate, of course, no, where it is appropriate, which must be determined by the secretary upon recommendation of the Pollution Adjudication Board, and the disconnection would be effective until such time that the proper environmental safeguards, I mean, that's the closure, or the suspension, or the cessation of operations, or even the disconnection, will be effective until such time as the proper environmental safeguards are put in place, or compliance with the act and its rules are undertaken. All right? And then we go to gross violations. Now, again, while prohibited acts are violations that lead to civil and administrative penalties, gross violations, just like gross violations in the Philippine Clean Air Act, are criminal in nature. All right? In case of gross violation, criminal charges are filed by the secretary upon the recommendation of the Pollution Adjudication Board. No? And if we try to look at the law, there are these instances of gross violations, right? The deliberate discharge of toxic pollutants under this law, this Republic Act number 6969 in toxic amounts, all right? Or five or more violations within a period of 2 years. Okay, and C, we have blatant disregard of the orders of PAB. Okay, and who shall be liable for gross violations? This is a criminal action, right? And so, if it's a natural person who is responsible, of course, that natural person will be liable for the criminal act. However, when the offender is a juridical person, okay, the president, the manager, directors, the trustees, the pollution control officer, or the officials directly in charge of the operations shall suffer the penalty provided in the law. Okay, if the offender is a juridical person, it's the president, the manager, the directors, the trustees, pollution control officer, or the officials directly in charge of the operation. They shall suffer the penalty, including the most appropriately the penalty of imprisonment. Note, this same rule applies to gross violations in the Philippine Clean Air Act. Right? And so that ends our module 3-B. Okay? In the next module, we'll have module 3-C, which is on the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. All right? Thank you for listening and viewing our video lectures for module 3-B, and see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.